Well, all right, and welcome to Ignite Thursday. Looks like we have no issues. And tonight, I just want you guys to know it might be a heavy rant session tonight. I had a theme for this week, but let me just go ahead, before I even get into all that, I want to go ahead and start out with the fact that the Ignite Thursdays that I've been doing originally originated from the underdog experiment, which is something I developed some pillars, which were essentially like perspectives on things that I found would really help people that have made a dramatic difference in my life when it came to health, finances, people skills. And in building off that, I kind of originated, well, you know what? This really isn't working out because you need to go even further back into the mindset. And then I really started getting pumped because I was like, you know what? The mindset is where it's at. The mindset is where it begins and it ends. And so I started this underdog experiment. It's been refined, and now it eventually evolved into Ignite Thursday. So I come on here, talk about mindset, talk about optimizing that mindset, and talk about perspective a lot because I think it's important to be able to get you to where you want to be in life, to be able to ignite change in your life. And with that being said, right, tonight's theme, I'm not gonna lie, it's changed like a million times. That's why I said in the beginning that it might be a little rant heavy tonight. I just have a lot of thoughts and ideas, and I might just dwindle it down to a lot of my story and how it can relate and hopefully help you guys. Again, coming into this tonight, I wanted to actually talk about negative environments and gratitude. I thought that was important to kind of separate that, and I think I'm going to carry that on into a different live tonight, which I might even touch on tonight since I'm so random tonight, which I don't think structure is always needed, especially when you're live. To go structure is just not cool, right? The cool kids don't do that. So being said, I wanted to be a little bit more relaxed. It's the holidays, right? I'm not so stiff all the time, and I want to relay that through the live a little bit better. That's why I do the lives and why I went live, to show you that I'm not stiff, that I do have a little bit of a personality. And again, I'm ranting. So with that being said, originally what I had done was I was going to come in to the theme of being, a negative environment and being grateful and trying to separate those. But which again is something I think that is important that I will move to another live. But again, being with the holidays, we're going to change it up a little bit. I did get a comment this morning, which I think is why I've been I started changing the theme around because I got a comment on somebody. It was obviously, I was getting trolled on one of my videos I had on TikTok, which I don't really show TikTok on any of my feeds here, but I am on TikTok at Discover Ignites. And I was getting trolled on there. Nonetheless, it doesn't bother me. Getting trolled doesn't really bother me because I've lived the journey to know what's on the other side, right? I've been at a young age where I didn't know anything. And when you come from a place where you don't have a lot of perspective and you don't have experiences in your life, right, it's easier to cast judgment faster because, especially at a young age, coming out of high school, you think you know everything until the world slaps you in the face and says, you know what, you don't. Sometimes you get slapped a couple more times, but nonetheless, today I came in here off that comment going with change, if it's a bad thing or a good thing. And in short summary, change is neither bad or good, but it is necessary. And then looking back at my videos, I realized that on one of the Thursday Ignite Lives, I did talk about change and how important it is. And so I didn't want to kind of reiterate a lot of the stuff I talked in that video, but I wanted to kind of come into it at a different approach. And I thought, well, maybe if I shared my story, my life of change and why it's important to me. And in looking at that comment, I started to really think, well, I like negative comments because of the fact that I'm trying to understand the mindset. Whenever somebody says something, I always try to reverse engineer where it's coming from. because I think that's extremely important. A lot of times we fail to see that we have problems, and we fail to see that we need change in our life. Especially nowadays, change is being forced upon us, and change isn't always it's not something you like, right? It can be something you like, something you actually enforce in your life is change, or something that is brought upon you. And right now we're all seeing it being brought upon us. It's not a change we want, and it's not comfortable. Change is never comfortable until you make it comfortable. Being said, and so this comment, I was trying to depict where it was coming from. And the only thing I could really think of was either one, this person is young. I don't know if it was a male or female. This person was young. Secondly, they probably don't have any perspective. And thirdly, it's just not knowing. It's not having the experience or having the perspective, and realizing that change is a necessary part of life. And whether you want to believe it or not, change is going to happen. And I started relaying back to a lot of the different parts of my life that I've talked about, like I just said, that I've had a lot of change in my life. A lot of it was brought upon me, and so a lot of it I've brought upon myself. But being said, there's always this time when you feel like you feel like you lose yourself. And this is where change comes in, because life is consistently changing, and whether we want to believe it or not, a lot of times, we run on this autopilot, and then one day we wake up realizing, who am I? And you forgot where you were along the way. But normally, to get to that point, there was an event in your life that it typically occurred, and you kind of let yourself drop off, and then you're realizing that through time you are changing anyway. Whether you see it or not, or choose to see it, you are changing. And then one day you kind of just get this like awakening, like, oh man, like I don't even know who I am anymore. And this is just to prove the fact that you are always changing, whether you're in control of that change or you're not in control of that change. And so in saying that, in looking at that comment, I can see why he said that comment. I don't want to actually repeat what that comment was. It wasn't anything really bad. I mean, he just essentially said that what I had in the video was complete BS, which I was at that point too, right? Like I didn't believe a lot of the stuff I teach. I didn't believe. I changed my thought process and realized that this stuff works. These tools work. They make a difference in your life. Right now, I'm not talking about the kind of change to change the person that you are. I think when you look at change, people think that you're trying to change the person you are. The person you are never changes, but you just improve yourself, right? That's what the kind of change I talk about. That's the kind of change I try to teach people, and to allow them to bring new change, new perspective, because it can change your life, right? And let's just talk about some of the brief changes I've had, and then we can go a little bit back and kind of see how it all started. I know you're all waiting for the stories. The juicy stories are always the best part, so we're going to kind of push that off a little bit here. But but with that being said, right, like some of the changes I've had, especially more recent changes, I've had a lot of great changes throughout my life. More recently, I've gotten some perspective that has really made me change. I talk about the plant-based diet a lot. That was something that I changed because of my health. I had a health scare. It caused me to seek change, right? I didn't really have a choice. I mean, I had a choice. I could have not done anything and got on medication, right? Or I could have put in effort and try to figure out a way to fix it, because I've always been one to try to fix stuff naturally. And so I sought it out, and I found plant-based diet. Was that something I was ecstatic about? No, it wasn't. I didn't know anything about it, and I thought it was absolutely absurd and ridiculous. And there was no way I was going to do it. And then I was like, well, everything is pointing this way if this is what I want to do. And then, other aspects started coming in, right? Like I have young kids, and do I want my young kids to grow up without a father, right? These thoughts and ideas, only because my father had recently passed. Not trying to make this morbid or anything, but right, all this stuff kind of was in the forefront of my mind. So I had to make a dramatic change. And to do that naturally, I kind of had to just jump and see where it led me. But to do that, this is all leading up, believe me, this is all leading up to this comment. It's building, it's anticipating, I know. But building up to this comment, right, like going into it, change was forced upon me, and I had to dramatically do something. And it's not till you get a perspective where you have to make that change, right? Like it's either do or die. And there's a lot of different sayings out there about you should live each day like you're going to die, and I believe that's extremely important. But you don't realize the significance of it until you are directly affected by it. And seeing my father pass and everything like that, and then thinking to myself, well, I don't want that to happen to my kids. I have heart palpitations. I was having all kinds of issues health-wise. I've always had high cholesterol, family history of heart issues. That's all I can think of was like, man, I'm at that age where I got to take care of myself, or else I don't know how much longer I got. And so that's why I went plant-based. But it wasn't until I was forced into that, and for me to make the dramatic change, or else I would have been like, plant-based, there's no way I'm doing that. Like, that doesn't make any sense. And I was like that commenter. I was the same way. Like, it's BS. Why would you do that? Society goes one way, right? Everybody wants to be part of the herd. And this is just natural. This is what we want. We want to be part of the herd. And so being said, plant-based being one of them. And then the next one I rolled into, which is not something I really talk about on my channel at all, my YouTube channel. That's where I do most of my stuff, is finances. I got into investing and started getting into trading, swing trading, and seeing how I could capitalize and make my money grow faster than the average person. Right now, there's a lot of different things that come into play there. I had to teach myself. I taught myself all this stuff, but when I teach myself, I go very deep on this stuff. So I'm not just going in. It's not to say that I teach myself a lot really deep and then dive in. I kind of dive in a little bit, and then I start teaching myself along the way. Right? I don't hesitate and then not dive in. Even with the plant-based stuff, I just started eating healthier stuff, a lot more plants and stuff, and I knew I was making this transition. And then I knew it would take time, right? It's not just full in, water over your head kind of thing. I was more just ease into it, but I was making progress. I was still moving towards that way. It's the same way with the finances and the trading. I started doing that, and seeing the results of what that has done, and the dramatic results it has done to change my life and put me in better positions in life. So not only am I healthy, I'm also financially in a better position to take advantage and leverage the things that I have. And so in doing this, I've done this in many different realms of my life, and I seek this kind of perspective because of that, because of those changes. And so again, it leads all up to that comment about, you will think this way until you have that dramatic shift, or you could try to apply these things, not come into these thoughts and these ideas with the fact that what is happening, what's going to happen, and trying to predict everything through your experiences, because your experiences, your perspective might be limited. And even though with all the things I've been through and everything, I try not to go into anything thinking I know it. Yes, I may know some things, and so I will try to relate, but every time that comes up, I try to be mindful of this stuff and not allow that to affect what I'm trying to learn. I try to come everything at a blank slate, like, okay, teach me. I want to know, okay, well, I know that piece of information. Is there anything different about that piece of information that I can take from it? And so that's the importance of that in that comment. Much winded, but this is the importance of change, and that it is always there. And to think that things will go back, this is why you can't live in the past, because you can't think that things will ever be the same. Things progress forward, they don't progress backwards. And this is why it's important to be in the now and to make the changes now, because you're trying to better your future and not to live in the past again, because it's not going to suit you, right? Your brain likes to do that, but that doesn't mean you have to choose or go along with that. But being said, like change in my life, I want to kind of dive into this because I've kind of briefly touched. If you follow me on YouTube, I have a lot of my story, especially a lot of my recent story, documented on there. You may have to do a little bit of digging because it's kind of jumps around a lot to a lot of different things, but there's reason for that because there was a lot of different change going on during that time. But being said, even at a young age, I grew up in New Mexico. Of all places, no, it is not part of Mexico. It is New Mexico. It is a state. I get asked that all the time. But yes, no, I did not live in Mexico. I lived in New Mexico. It is a state. And I lived there for most of my, until I was about 12, right? Like I bounced around a lot. Because of my father's job, I was bouncing around a lot. And so I actually was born in Texas, but too young to remember that really. And then moved to New Mexico. So at that point, I was always the same kind of person, right? And this is where I'm getting to with these whole stories and everything, is that then I was okay, right? You get blinded by the fact that you're comfortable in where you're at and you don't want to change. This is why I talk about comfort zones and everything, because at this point, I had friends, I had a regular routine, right? I knew what was coming, so I was comfortable with everything. Right? Might be some random things like a quiz during that day or whatever the case is. Whatever the changes that were coming in my life were minute, right? They weren't big changes. As a kid, they were big changes, but as an adult, you look at them, they're like, they're not really big changes. But nonetheless, at that young age, right, like I was comfortable. And then I remember when I was around, I think it was around 11, my parents decided, right, that they were going to pick up and move. And we moved to New York, upstate New York, of all places. So I went from this place that, it's not Mexico, but it was a pretty big, it was a town, but it was a pretty decent sized town, right? And even nowadays, I think where I used to live at is actually blown up pretty big. But back then it was a pretty decent sized town, right? There was a good couple thousand people there. I don't know, maybe even tens of thousands. I don't really recall. It was pretty big. But the town we moved into in New York was hundreds of people. It wasn't thousands of people. So there was a big difference there, and people knew your name. People knew you, right? You couldn't go do something and people not know who you were. And so going from that change to the small town, right? Like I was kind of just blended in the weeds, and I liked that. But I did, because again, coming from, I was a kid that was overweight and always picked on and everything like that. So I was coming from that into a new town where people were excited to see me, right? Because they have like no change, excited to see me, and it felt different. It felt weird. Going up there, I was scared, right? And like any change, you're going to be scared, and I felt extremely scared, and I didn't know what to expect, right? The uncertainty of what was coming. I didn't have a choice. It was coming. And I got there, and it turned out to be pretty good. Yes, there were some difficulties, right? It's that adjustment. And then after like a year or two, then I wasn't really known as the new kid anymore, right? It takes a couple of years when you come into that small town to not be known as the new kid anymore. But at that point, I had that change. And so I liked it. I liked where we were. And then after a couple of years, I realized that I didn't want to be there forever. It was such a small town, like it didn't have football, and I was big into football. And it's funny that a small town didn't have football, but this place didn't have football. And so I remember I was getting ready to go into high school. So I was up there for about 4 years. This is between New Mexico and New York. I was up there for about 4 years, and then my parents split. And I ended up going with my mom, and we stopped in Wisconsin for a little while, and I lived there for a couple of months with my grandfather. And that change was very different. It was going into high school, first of all, is just a very different experience. And then throwing a new, like the Midwest was completely different. Like I didn't even know how to react. And then trying out for football, I was excited I was able to try out for football, but realizing that, before I used to be the big kid, now I was a small kid. Now I was the one that had to have the speed and all this other stuff. And so it was just very overwhelming for me. And then I remember my aunt came out to visit us one time. I don't recall what for, but she came out to see us, and I think it was just because of the situation. And she said, "Well, why don't you just come out to California?" And I'm like, California? I was like, yes, West Coast is the best coast, right? I was like, East Coast and West Coast. Growing up, I was like, that is cool. And so in my mind, talking about it now, that's great and fancy, right? But that change was so dramatic. I was so excited because it was just California, right? I didn't know what to expect, but I felt it was just an upgrade from where we're at, and because I wasn't really fitting in with the whole Midwest, and it was just a different vibe for me that I don't know if I could really fit into that whole atmosphere, but nonetheless, we moved out to California, right? And so in California, I did all my high school in California, and it was an experience, right? Like I remember going to the first school, like my first school freshman, right? It was rough getting just used to the speed of things. The speed of things was so much slower on the West Coast than it was on the East Coast. Everything was so fast paced on the East Coast. And then, New Mexico was not fast paced. New York was fast paced, and then California was it felt slower. Everything was done at a much slower pace. Being said, so growing up there, right, doing high school there, and then I switched after freshman year. I went to a different high school. And so at that point, I kind of realized, change was something I enjoyed, and I wasn't fearful of it anymore, because I knew that there would be always goods and bads with change. I was accepting of the unknowing, and realizing that, it's not always, you're not going to know, right? Your brain likes to predict that the outcome could be, but I found even at that point in my life that it's never what you think it would be. It could be even way better, or it could just be different. It wasn't bad. It was never bad. It was just different. And so in saying that, I bounced around a lot, even from California. I spent a couple months in Australia for a little while, came back to California, realized California's too expensive. Then I went back to New York. I stayed with my dad, and at that point, I had another big change in my life, and I went in the military. And from that point, then I traveled around the world. And so I'm very familiar with change. And even going in the military, I've always been a very structured person, and that was just because of the way my father brought us up, right? Like it was having that structure. And then when my parents divorced, I was just with my mother. So I've had different perspectives. I've had a lot of different perspectives. I've seen a lot of different things, a lot of different experiences. But ultimately, I've always known that change is something that is going to happen. Again, whether you want to or not. And even going through life, right, after the military and traveling all over the world, seeing a bunch of different things that I would have no clue, right, seeing new perspective, the way other people live, which is something that I haven't really even gotten into either, is about how just Americans in general see life compared to other cultures. Other cultures see life completely different, and that's being grateful. You should be grateful that you live in a country where you have the freedom to do stuff, because going to some other countries, there's some other things that are really corrupt, even really bad to this day. And even saying that, going back to change, right? Even getting out of the military was a whole new perspective change. You essentially graduate from going to high school, right? Everything's paid for, and then you kind of live it on your own. You're struggling a little bit, and then I went back into the military, which is kind of like going into life with training wheels on, because everything is pretty much pre-planned for you. You don't need much thought. You just need to listen and take orders, right? Even going from that into the civilian world, it was different. It was dramatic. It was change. So there's a lot of dramatic life changes all happening at once throughout my life. And then going through a divorce, right, is dramatic change. Going through events with my father, going through events with my health, all hitting me at one time, uh, all in the span of like 2 years, or I think it was like just over 2 years, like 2.5 years. All these three things, bam, 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 just went off, and then I had to pull myself out of there, and that's why I started creating a better mindset, someplace that was peaceful and calming to me. And in doing that, I realized that the change is necessary, and that change can be brought to yourself by getting perspective and realizing that perspective is something that is needed. Because if you come from a place, this goes back, like if I had stayed in New Mexico and only knew New Mexico, like my life would be so much different. And a good example of this being, I remember when I went in the military and I did a boot camp and all that, and I had to go to my technical schools and all that. And I don't recall, I think it was, I went to my first duty station, which was overseas, and I was there for like a year or two, and I was missing home, so I came back, and I came back and visited my mother in California. And, you know, my best friend at the time was still there. My best friend at the time, you know, everybody I knew was still everybody was like, okay, everybody I hung out with went to college. I did other things, experimented with stuff, everything failed, went in the military, did 2 years, and I came back. Everybody was the same. And I was completely different. And I remember, you can blame it on the military. The military changed me a lot, but I was always seeking this beforehand. As I explained, like kind of how my life has always been changing. So at this point, to see them not change, and it had been like, I think 2 or 3 years, I want to say it was like 3 years after that a lot of people were just the same. They were the same selves. They were studying. They were doing good. I mean, they were going to college and doing that, but just the personality of the person, like their perspective was the same. Nothing changed. Excuse me. And it's just hard to see that, like to realize that they haven't challenged themselves to go seek new perspective. And it's hard because, you know, when you go through life, you think that things can't change unless you seek it. And I've realized, I guess at a young age, that you want to the change is constantly happening. Like you want to introduce the change yourself. And not seeing that even after 3 years, like they were the same person. Nothing was different. Everything was the same. They just went to college. I didn't. I had started seeing the world. I had started experiencing many different things. I was very rigid in my life up to the military, and then I kind of just let go, and I kind of just really lived my life in my younger years in the military, because I think I was making up for lost time. And then even now, right, like I've changed my life a lot to where I'm making up for lost time and putting in a lot more effort into those things that I want in life, and realizing that what it takes is to introduce the change yourself, and know that the things that you want in life, there's going to be a lot of resistance, right? Change, I think people associate change with being a bad thing because it takes you out of the norm. You're not in that comfort zone, and you have to realize that being in there can be really detrimental to your life. And realizing that, like me going back and seeing my friends, 3 years you're still going to be in the same spot unless you introduce change into your life. You're going to be in the same spot. It's wishing and hoping that something bigger and better will come and rescue you. It's not going to happen. Right now, I do believe, you know, I started getting more back into the energy stuff, and it's important because when you find that energy, you know, you are more apt to go do things. You don't need to be working off of supplements and all this other stuff, right? You find your purpose, right? I associate your energy with your purpose. You can line the two. In my mind, that's the way I see it, because I lose sense of time and self. And so to introduce change that you want to in life, you need to make a change. You need to introduce the change. The change, again, will be brought, like we all see nowadays what's going on. Change will be brought into your life, whether you want it to or not. A lot of times, these changes are so minute that you don't notice them until you realize that you don't know who you are anymore. And that, again, could be introduced by some change in your life, whether it's a health scare, whatever the case is. And so you let go of a lot of the things that were benefiting you or progressing yourself in life. You let it fall off. And in doing that, right, you're going to have to make the changes and not come at it as it being a good or bad thing. That's also one thing I've learned, is you can't see anything. And I try to correct myself if it's a positive or negative thing. It's also something I want to talk about, because I was joining a live today, and one of my friends was talking about how she was always stuck on negative thoughts. Like, she was getting she'd get positive feedback, but she wouldn't buy into that. And I could so relate to that, because I was like, I get, not to toot my own horn, I work hard in my life, even in my job and everything that I've done. I've always worked hard. I've always dedicated. I've always pushed hard, and I've blown my my promotions, right? I've blown them out of the water. Every time that I have a promotion, I always blow it out of the water, because I always provide a unique perspective, and I always do things because I know that, if you can just take the initiative and do it, and yeah, it's always fearful, and yeah, I may be judged, but if you're the first person to do it, right, like, so what? I had the courage to step up and just do it. And so that's just the way I've always been. Now, that being said, right, like, in introducing change, you have to do something in life, right? Like, again, things aren't just going to fall in your lap. And again, why I started doing a lot more, and I came back, I did take a brief hiatus on YouTube and Instagram, because I pursued something else. I pursued the trading and the investing side of the house. I didn't give up my entrepreneurial ventures, right? I found something that I was passionate about, although I always kept an eye on my YouTube channel, because I've always, looking back, when I was younger, when I first did college, because I did do college briefly before I dropped out and just went full time, working like 80 hours a week and all that kind of jazz. I did try to get into psychology at one point. It was something I was interested in. I've always been interested in helping people. And when I did take that brief hiatus and focus on the investment side of the house, I started, I would always like monitor the channel. And whenever there was a comment, I would still help people, because I've always tried to help people better their lives. And again, change being the biggest thing. And how can you ignite change in someone? How can you get someone to see change? They feel like they don't have a problem. They feel like everything is fine and dandy. This is also called, I think, the Kruger effect, right? Essentially, I think I'm saying it right, but it's essentially, you don't have the knowledge, you don't have the experience, so you think that things can't be changed, or things that you don't see it with your perspective being wrong. I'm not in the field to prove people's perspectives wrong. I'm just saying that you need to provide yourself more perspective, and the power and perspective that can help change your life, and how important it is, not just in navigating life, but introducing the changes that you want in life. And by doing that, you have to educate yourself on things, and you have to go outside. It's just extremely important. What is going on, Lily? Nice to see you. First viewer towards the end. Yeah, so from gaining perspective, I think it's just, or looking for change. Nice for you to join, Lily. I hope it's nice and warm down there in Mexico for you. But because it's freezing up here in Virginia, just saying. But so that's pretty much the change that I've faced in my life, and why I think it's important. I think you need to introduce the change that you want in your life. And again, I've become comfortable, but it's taken time. And I think a lot of people need to take the time to make smaller changes, especially if you aren't educating yourself and you want to make that change, because trying to ignite change. Super warm, huh? I'm jealous, I can tell you that. Had a big snowstorm. But as far as like, as far as change, right? I think you just have to start. You have to want to change. No one can force you to change. And never pretend like you know everything. And I've learned many times over, I don't know if you guys can hear the train. I know I'm getting distracted by the train, but it's to know that you have to, it'll go away eventually. You can only hold this horn for so long. But again, you have to obtain knowledge, right? And that's my biggest thing, is to seek the perspective and to introduce the change, and not come at somebody like this comment, right? Don't come at somebody thinking you know everything. You may know a lot. Maybe this commenter, this troll did know a lot. I don't know. I don't know where they're coming from. That's why I try to reverse engineer a lot of this stuff. But being said, change is important. Change is something you need to introduce into your life, and be okay with uncertainty. And to do that, you have to make small changes, right? You don't dive headfirst, like I talked about in the beginning of the stream. Don't dive headfirst into it, because it's going to be tough. It's going to be rough to try to do that. I've always tried to do a little bit of prep work and then just go right to it, right? Just know the basics and get into it. Start diving in, because you realize that a lot of the framework that's given to you, it's never going to work out that way. It's just to get you started. And it's kind of just to correct your mindset, but you still have to introduce that change and refine and everything when you go along the way, go along your journey. With that being said, closing this up, I've already ranted for almost 40 minutes. It's a magic show just by one, but I do have Lily here joining, so that's fantastic. So I wasn't. At least it's a good way to close it out. But yeah, if you guys have any questions on change or anything like that, if anybody wants to actually review this video recap, it's going on YouTube afterwards. So for those people that are missing out, because I was normally doing this on YouTube and Facebook, but now it's just on Instagram. And I'm debating if I should be going back or not. That's still debating right now, but we'll see. I don't want to flip-flop too many times. But I do like change, so that's what happens. But that's what I got going for you guys today. Change, I know, was a topic I did talk about before, but again, go out, learn more, experience more. It's important. Change is good. Change can be good. It's neither good nor bad, but it is necessary. Change is always necessary, but introduce change that you want, not change that you're given. So being said, I think at that point I'm going to sign out. So thank you, Lily, for joining me. And until next time, guys, I will see you guys later.